All right. This video I'm going to talk about something a little different, and I'm going to talk about categories of goods. Categories of goods. So goods can be considered rival. Okay. So that's rival is when one person consuming the good, but consuming a unit of the good means no one else can consume that unit, at least not at the same time. Okay. So when one is consuming the unit of the good means no one else can consume that same unit at the same time. So that's one way to categorize goods, is whether or not they're rival, that same unit at the same time. Okay, so some examples of this. These are easy because they're things you're very familiar with. Most goods are rival. Chair, coffee, sandwich, t-shirt. Right, so just normal goods are rival. The normal things we think about. And then the opposite of this is something called non-rival. Okay, economists are really creative at thinking of names. We think of some of the most boring names. Okay, so this is just the opposite. I'm not going to write out the definition. This is the opposite, meaning so this one is the opposite. And so what I mean by that is, well, more than one person can consume the same unit at the same time. So let me give you some examples. A classic one, radio broadcast. Okay, so you're listening to the radio. I don't know if any of you still listen to the radio, and I'm listening to the radio. I listen to the radio a lot, and when I say radio, I mean FM or AM, over the air. Then we could be listening to the same station at the same time, and we're not going to interfere with each other. You listening to it and not me listening to it doesn't cause there to be any less radio for one of us. Okay, so this is an idea. If you're in a class and as long as it's not crowded, then that's also non-rival, right? So if you're listening to a lecture and somebody else is listening to a lecture, and you don't interfere with each other. Right now, you could both be listening to this video, and again, it's non-rival. One of you could be listening to it, somebody else could be listening to it in another place, and it's not going to interfere with each other. Okay. So a movie, also the same thing if it's not crowded. Some other ideas, clean air, okay, is non-rival. I'm breathing clean air, you're breathing clean air. And those don't interfere with each other. So lots of these kind of things are non-rival. Lots of people can use them at the same time. The second way to classify goods is whether or not they're excludable. Okay, so can we excludable, to put it simply, just means if someone does not pay, you can stop them from using it. Doesn't mean you have to stop them, but you could if you wanted to. Okay, we can stop them from consuming. Okay, so let's give some examples. So first of all, most goods. Okay, well, in fact, we have laws about it. It's mostly called stealing if you take goods without paying. But we also have I'll just do some of the examples we talked about before. Class, a movie in a theater. Okay, so they're excludable. They're generally in some location that you have to do something to enter. Toll roads, excludable. And then finally, non-excludable. Okay, so non-excludable. Sometimes non-excludable is because it's impossible to exclude people, and other times it's just not allowed to exclude them because of like some kind of rule or social norm. So this is you can't make them pay. So it's either because not feasible to make them pay, or it's because it's not allowed to make them pay. We can't make them pay for their use. Not pay in general like a tax, but to make pay for their use. Okay, so some examples of this, some general examples. The radio. Okay, now it is possible if you're using like satellite radio, they can make you pay, but general FM AM is just broadcast over the air, and you can, as long as you have a receiver, you can catch it. Also, public space, like a public road that's not a toll road, a public park that doesn't have some kind of entrance, like a neighborhood park, a sidewalk. Okay, these are all non-excludable, either because we're not allowed to make people pay, or because it's just not feasible. Okay, so let's then take these four things and create four categories of goods. Okay, so that's the last part we're going to do here. So again, we have excludable, non-excludable, rival, non-rival. Okay, so let's get our four categories of goods. Okay, so at the top, we're going to have excludable and non-excludable. At the side, we're going to have rival Okay, and so the excludable and rival, that's easy. That's actually what we've been doing for most of our time. This is called a private good. Okay, so private good is like a t-shirt, a pizza, and these are easy. Markets work really well for those kind of things. Okay, so they work really well for those kind of things. A second kind of excludable good is called a club good. Oops, let me use black. They're called a club good. Sometimes people call them um, a quasi-public good. Okay, but I'm going to call them a club good. So this would be like cable TV. You got to pay, or they shut off your cable TV, satellite radio. So these are public. I mean, sorry, these are non-rival because two people can be using it at the same time, but they are excludable in that they can make you pay. Two other examples: a toll road and a gym. Now the last two, I should put a caveat: if not crowded. Okay, and then we also have our non-excludable. Okay, things that are not excludable, but they are rival. Okay, so common resources. These are known as common resources. Um, the classic one is you probably heard of the tragedy of the commons, which we're going to talk about this week, is a public pasture land. Okay, that's a classic one. Um, Another one that's related to the tragedy of the commons is fish in the ocean. Okay, so the ocean, especially the international waters, is non-excludable, but catching the fish is rival. The more that one person catches, the less fish will be available for everybody else, especially if they overfish. And also we can consider crowded public space here. Okay, once it gets crowded, then public space starts to go into that. Finally, we have something called the public goods. Okay, and I'll give two examples that are just classic examples of public goods. We'll come back to each one of these in more detail. One is national defense. So this is both non-excludable and non-rival, meaning if there's an army defending your nation, then you can't exclude one individual from it, right? You're either protecting the country from attack, or you're not protecting the country from attack. You can't say, well, if you don't pay, then you don't get, right? That's why these things, generally we don't pay like a subscription fee to the military that we can sign up to or not. We generally pay for these things through taxes. It's also non-rival. You getting more defense doesn't give me less defense, assuming that we're protecting the whole country. Another idea is a radio broadcast. Again, this one is also TV over the air is also here. So again, these are public goods. Everyone can get them. You can't be excluded from them as long as you have for example, the radio broadcast, as long as you have an AM or FM radio, you can receive it. And it's not rival in the sense that the more you listen to doesn't take away my listening ability. So we've already talked about private goods, and we'll come back this week and talk about each of the other three